Okay, so I'm back with Dave Ursillo, who I interviewed, I think it must be a couple of years now since I spoke to you, Dave, as part of the original Fearless Fridays. I'd love to hear from you, if you can remember the original transition that you did, and then also, then we'll dig into a little bit what's changed for you and what's happening now and the latest gossip from your world.
Absolutely, Anna. Thank you so much for having me back. It's funny when before we started hitting record, to reflect back on like the original change that we talked about, because I think one of the real challenges or disciplines of this work that we find ourselves in, but also one of the benefits is this process of constant reinvention
Mm-hmm.
or evolution, which I think really early on, even just a couple of years ago when we spoke, could sometimes feel very erratic. You kind of feel like your path is going every which way. But I really find that that's not only a benefit to the creative process or being self-employed as a creative entrepreneur, as I am, but that it's almost just like a mindset shift. And one mindset is feeling like your path is going every which way. But that's only just to challenge this assumption that the path that we have or should have is very linear.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost think of it more as more like cyclical and progressive, of revisiting certain themes and certain ideas. And that ties into, my original transition that we talked about in Fearless Fridays, which was going from the world of politics and public service, as I was in a certain time, which feels like ancient history. And I'm also, hand to God, very grateful that I got out of it when I did, because it's only gotten worse on this side of the pond and kind of everywhere. But moving from the world of politics, when I had a lot of doe-eyed ambitions to be the change I wanted to see in the world, and I had, being a writer type, I thought, how cool would it be to become a presidential speechwriter someday, or to use my words to have some sort of effect of inspiration or healing or motivation on a big level. And I kind of just transplanted that dream, which was doe-eyed then, into another doe-eyed dream, which was, just hoping to become a best-selling author, after I wrote one book. And that didn't happen, suffice it to say. And in the transition, I found myself kind of falling into a new pattern of work that I didn't predict, which was being asked by friends, many of whom were actually located in the UK and in Northern Europe, who just kind of were in the similar network, who started asking me if I could help them write their About Me pages. And because I was skilled as a writer and had a certain level of empathy and understanding for what these individuals were trying to do as health coaches, as writing coaches, began to write their About Me pages for them and with them, in the sense of being almost like a ghostwriter. And I turned that into an arm of my business, which remains to this day, called Story Shine. And it is exactly that. I help self-employed people, mostly everyone from authors to freelance writers. I've worked with people in the commercial loan underwriting business, serial entrepreneurs, like a very wide range of medical professionals. One of my current clients designs liquid handling devices for the scientific community, like very niche and interesting things, which is awesome because I get to learn about them. But I work with clients to help them basically make sure that they have a narrative that's on their LinkedIn pages, on their About Me pages, and even cover letters that they use to apply to different work. And it's a fun way of taking what this big dream once was, of using my words to, make a big impact on a global level. And to some extent, I still have that as a writer, and as an author, still breathing life into that dream, But on an individual level, it's almost more rewarding to help somebody live the best life that they can live and get a better job and to provide for their family, which is really, really cool. And it's a total gift and an honor to have that opportunity. So that's with the original pivot. And I'll let you jump in to guide me to the next pivot and how that's all been evolving too.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, before doing that, I just want to pick up on something that you said at the beginning, because you said very interesting at the beginning, you're very much sort of opening up, I think, because you've been on that sort of narrow path that you thought, I'm going to be a speechwriter, I'm going to make a difference in politics. And at the beginning, as you said, you do have to kind of throw spaghetti at the wall, as they say, and try things, and you think this is going to work, and then, somebody asked you to do this. Is there a point at which you sort of stop expanding and exploring and you begin to narrow down and things start to make sense and fall into place?
I think yes and no. And here's how I'll answer that, because for a while, there's a really necessary period of experimentation.
Absolutely.
But there's a very fine line, as you can probably attest to as well, Anna, where the experimentation can become so broad that it's almost like this is something that happens with creatives too. Creatives who have a lot of ideas, who say, because I'm still a writing coach as well, who say that, they don't know which project to land on. They have so many ideas, they can't even like write a single blog post, let alone figure out what their one thing is or like which book they're going to write. So at a certain level, the creative whimsy and experimentation phase can become a little bit of like self-sabotage, where, the line to walk is keeping open and imaginative and creative, but being disciplined around the edges of like how far and wide you go with the experimentation. Something that I recommend, especially with my writing clients, is to give them an outlet to like retain their creative ideas, but not to become enslaved by them. So like literally to keep a journal of their ideas, everything from like one-liners that come into their minds, like, ooh, that's a really juicy thought, to blog post ideas, to book ideas, to project ideas. Like just take it, spend 30 seconds to 5 minutes like putting it somewhere so you won't lose the idea, right? Because that's a big fear. And then go back to like the disciplined work, what's making you money, what's helping you support yourself, what skills you're developing, and to almost segment your time so that you can give yourself to the creativity and honor the muses and the inspiration, but not let it control you. So that's the kind of point that I needed to get to, but it took me a while to get there because I didn't recognize my own bad habit, like the shadow tendency, the behavioral kind of like crutch of putting like really trying to get good at a skill, like the storytelling work, versus spinning my wheels because that was fun, but it wasn't going to make me any money, and I wasn't getting better at something that was valuable that someone else would pay for, which is a necessary ingredient of working for yourself, as it turns out.
As it turns out, but that's a very insightful point, I think. And I think we do, and I certainly went through quite sort of a hippie freedom phase. You're rebelling. I kind of turned my back on the skills that I had in the past. And as you say, you sort of don't want to be restricted by routine, and you just try this and try that, and you're out there and exploring, and you're on this sort of high. And then as you say, you begin to realize, oh, okay, actually, I need to focus on one thing at a time. I need to actually take some consistent action. I need to make progress. And importantly, as you said, I need to do something that's of value for other people. So it becomes more kind of an external focus as well. It's no longer just, I want to quit my job and be free, but hang on, how do I add value and create value? Something else that you said last time I remember that I loved is that you there were some things that you were sort of resisting, and then you had learned to kind of lean towards the things that you're trying to avoid. Is that something that you've continued to sort of have success with, I guess?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Anna. And what's really funny about that is I've kind of become a teacher of avoidance now. So continuing on from my storytelling work, I'm still writing, still blogging, still self-publishing books, and I'm actually, as of our recording, self-publishing one this coming week. It's just like a little miniature book of essays. But so I'm still like in that writing. One of my big pivots had been going from, again, this dream of being a best-selling author and like to helping to teach people and to show people how to be better writers themselves, because it's something that always came naturally to me. One of the things that I learned when I was working with my writers group, this private membership writers group called the Literati Writers that I ran for about 5 years, turned into a writing course that I just developed late last year and have been beta testing with a few dozen people. It's called Unavoidable Writing, and that's what I wanted to tie in, was the subject of avoidance. As both a yogi and as a teacher of writing, and helping work with writers and aspiring authors, but creative entrepreneurs as well, is that I find that the thing that we avoid the most, whether it's a topic of writing, a project that we feel like we should do, or even just like what we should choose on the to-do list on any given day, that what we're avoiding the most says a lot about the underlying emotional and even spiritual experience that we're having in our work, in our creative world on any given moment. And what that means is, over the years, as you mentioned, Anna, I started to become, just by default, a student of my avoidance, because being self-employed, I started to notice a pattern where it was far easier for me to hide from, doing more client work, or it was really easy for me to kind of just literally avoid some amount of emotional discomfort through the things that I really didn't want to do the most. And every time I kind of turned into that and tried to face what I was avoiding the most, which for me often was a result of the shadow fear that I have of like being seen and feeling worthy and like self-worth and self-confidence, things that go back like years and years and years, that I would go through these major phases of learning and evolution, not only personally, but in my business and creatively. So every time I faced what I was avoiding, I would like come up with like a new project that felt really rewarding and really brought people and readers and clients closer to me. Or I would go through a phase of learning and growth that like helped me become better in relationships and things like that. So my course on avoidable writing takes this kind of mentality, and I created a system through which I help writers in particular, creatives in particular, kind of like self-diagnose what they're avoiding through the scripts and excuses and self-limiting beliefs that most writers will say about, their journaling practice or that they're trying to write, and use that to be a method for finding out what you should actually be writing about, or different exercises for how to get through that avoidance. Because for me, and this is like the yogi in me talking, the thing that we're avoiding the most is the thing that we necessarily need to learn. Because we're avoiding it, it shows that there's an edge of like extreme personal growth or learning that's possible. So I use that mentality and apply it to writing, because as we all know, whether it's working for yourself, whether it's working for, having a traditional like 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6 job, the friction points that we feel the most significantly, like those repeated patterns of things that we can't seem to escape, are almost like antagonizing us for our attention, so that we can have an opportunity to learn from and grow from them. That doesn't mean that we have to go through like extreme shifts and changes and growth, but when the avoidance is there, it usually means that there's something that we're capable of embracing or transcending or healing to become more of our true selves, to get through like any baggage that we may be carrying, and to carry on doing the work that we want to do, having the impact that we want to have, and finding the freedom that we want to have. So that's how I've went from kind of like just facing my avoidance to actually kind of systematizing and trying to teach this in a new course, which is proving to be pretty effective for the first beta students, which I'm thrilled about.
Amazing. And are you finding now you can sort of connect the dots, as Steve Jobs says, looking back, it all sounds like it makes sense when you tell it, this all sounds like it's sort of your calling, if you want to call it that, but it certainly falls into place quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly right. I mean, hindsight is perfect. And it's, I've been working for myself for almost 9 years now. And if I tried to explain how many directions I tried to go in, and even just like how many projects, like offers or worksheets or workbooks or like one-on-one coaching and client offers that I had like either thought of or developed or launched, and that made me like no money or cost me money. It would like no one would buy any of my business advice. Like that's the truth.
I don't think that's true, because I think that's true for everybody, right? Maybe we don't all share it, but I'm certainly sure that people who succeed have gone through a lot of different versions before they get there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why you and I are here, Anna, and why you watching is here as well, is because as like being in these roles of being, I think we're all teachers, but being on the forefront of our own personal learning has a really important reason. It's not only for ourselves, but there's some of us who try to walk on the edges of our own knowing, to lead by example, so that we can teach what we have learned and experienced ourselves. And that's not a really easy path, period, but it's not easy for a lot of people. So by, embodying this sense of personal leadership in whatever avenue that we are walking down, that's part of the process. I think there has to be a lot of failure and a lot of setbacks and a lot of second guessing, not because we're masochists, but because to figure it out and to figure out a lot that we can then actually teach something of worth to somebody else takes a lot of trial and error. And that's why you don't really have, the most like wise teachers in the world aren't people who just like fell into success. Like by accident. They're the ones who have like interesting stories about failure and setback and overcoming, because that's how you really learn a lot of what somebody else would find valuable.
Oh, wow. Beautifully put. No, that's absolutely true. And there's always a level of discomfort, I find, that comes with, either just before a breakthrough or something, as you said, that's sort of uncomfortable that you're leaning towards makes such a difference. Given that it is 9 years now since you made that initial transition, I suppose, are there new challenges now? What's sort of the next level of learning that you're planning to do in your business and life?
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. That's a great question. I'd say that, something that I constantly return to is how much do I need versus like how much do I want? And that in the scope of not just like earning and providing for myself in the business sense, but also like attention and marketing and self-promotion. Because I've found consistently throughout the years that the most effective ways of doing business is through relationships. It's through emotional vulnerability. It's through like really caring first. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of like emotional bandwidth to do that with clients and readers, and just like in the scope of living your life too as a human being. And I'm often curious about like how the landscape of the digital world that we're living in is changing how people interact with our work individually, because attention spans only can hold so much. And so I go back and forth sometimes of going a little bit too far into doing self-promotional things and creating new things for free, when I know that the most effective ways of kind of continuing to do what I do and to continuing to serve people is by like picking up the phone and just like calling someone, and rather than doing an email blast to a few thousand readers, like emailing someone individually, which always gets a better response like rate, but also just like an actual response versus blasting out a newsletter. So there's things like that I'm often just kind of curious about, and in learning, how much does get invested emotionally, energetically, financially into Facebook ad, versus like just emailing someone you haven't talked to in a while, and you're like, this would probably be good, no matter what comes of it, if they buy something that I'm selling or not, just to be like, hey, how are you? How are things? Like, what's new? I think is a lot more effective for my own learning. So I guess the thing that I'm saying is the continued challenge is to remember to not hide behind the internet and just to be using it as a way to keep being with people and for people.
But that's so interesting, because even in the few years, and I haven't been going as long as you, but the few years I've been doing this, there was so much about automation, email, all these email sequences and so on. And now, very recently, it's really pivoted towards much more, as you said, and it's an overused word, but authenticity and one-on-one and being vulnerable and not worrying about, the perfect makeup, lighting, and just getting on a line and talking to people. And I love that. As you say, it does take a lot of emotional energy to really connect with people, but it's nice to kind of, in a way, go back to that kind of one-on-one connection, and a small number of quality people who really engage and resonate is so much more powerful than thousands of people who never open your emails, right?
Totally, it's exactly right, and that's what's going to last, Anna. I believe that's what's going to last through these different like fads and phases of internet marketing and content marketing. Is going to be just like human connection. Like it's almost like really unsexy, but it's really true, because it's our nature. It's how our brains work and how our emotions work. And I think what you're describing, about these different fads of like automation and drip funnels and lighting your studio the right way, like that's all well and good. The reason that it's such a fad, I believe, is because that makes people who sell it a lot of money. It's like there's a lot of money to be had in selling people on making money. That's the truth of the matter. And for some people, they just want to exploit that and sell them the hope and the dream of like, here's X number of ways to light your home office for a perfect video. And that's all well and good. But I think at the end of the day, that's the kind of the gut check that I'm talking about for myself is like, don't hide behind the internet tactics just as much as you don't want to hide behind like social
Yes.
media to connect with people. Like you got to go out and like walk down the street and like say hi to somebody just as much as you know, try to cold email somebody who may be interested in a product. And that's just to keep yourself honest, because if you do one without the other in today's business world, then I think you're going to be set up for like a lot of frustration and probably overspending on resources that you don't actually require. So.
Great. No, couldn't agree more. And I guess wrapping up, I could talk to you forever, but I'm conscious of the time, so I want to be respectful of that. If you could now go back and give yourself or give someone else who's a bit further back some advice based on the, you know, new learning and wisdom that you've had since we spoke, I guess, a couple of years ago, can you think of anything new that you would add to your advice, or any kind of tips or watch outs?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I just kind of railed a little bit on the particular watchouts. So instead of throwing up more cautionary tales, I think the thing that I'd really like to tell myself or someone in the position a few years ago would be like, I want to encourage more people to go for it. And I don't know if this is me and my social circles online, but I feel like there's a lot of people who aren't going for it and aren't like trying to actually become fully self-employed, which doesn't have to be anyone's goal. But to like have an impact and to have a message that's more than what's already been done and what's been said. In the scope of earning and providing for yourself, I think the best thing that I did was having people pay for services that I gave them way too much for way too much money. And that just like really taught me how to value my services and my time better, and to not be afraid to start earning too little, so long as you're not, you know, putting yourself into extraordinary debt or putting your family in jeopardy, especially when you're freelancing. Like it's okay to start earning below your keep if it means learning how to earn more than you once were. And then otherwise, just like to remember to go for it, to aim high, not in the sense of becoming like Tim Ferriss or something, but just to really be determined to have an impact on people online and offline too.
I think that's great. I mean, undervaluing your services absolutely is such a challenge, isn't it? It's so easy to say, oh, I'll do it for free, or, you know, oh, I can't possibly charge more than that, and so on. So that's a good one to remind everybody. And then also going for it, I think it's just a roller coaster of, you know, you want to make a big impact and then you get, again, distracted by all the sort of shiny internet stuff. You maybe get imposter syndrome, you get too busy and you suddenly forget why you're doing it in the first place. So that's a great reminder as well to sort of be yourself as well, right? Because that's how you can make the biggest difference and stop kind of looking to see what everyone else is doing and try to stick with your guns and go for what feels true to you as well. So love that advice. Sure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Anna. Thank you for having me back. And
no, so lovely to hear what you've been up to. So you've mentioned a few of the projects. Where can we find you if somebody wants to sign up the next time you run the writing group, or wants help with their About Me page, if you're still doing that? Where can we find you in the online world?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. I mean, you can always find me online at daveursillo.com. The last name is just Ursillo. I'm sure there'll be a link included somewhere.
Absolutely.
So if you want to learn more about unavoidable writing, we open just a couple times a year for new students. You can find that at unavoidableWriting.com, or you could text writing to 345-345. That's some pretty cool technology.
That's pretty amazing text marketing there. I love it.
Yeah, right. Well, that was unplanned, but that's what I include that when I do a workshop or talk. And it's cool because someone can just bring out their phone and just text it and sign up to learn more info. So yeah, you're welcome to, I really enjoy these conversations, and I really enjoy developing relationships with potential clients or just readers that sometimes like don't come around for a number of years, when then like you start working with somebody on a one-to-one level. That's really cool too. I'd say that's another piece of advice is understand that when you're planting seeds of trying to create change in the world, that sometimes they can take like years to even just like bud a little bit. But it's pretty cool because it shows you that all the work that you're putting in is worth it. So
Yes,
that's
it's
where to
so
find
true. People can be
Yeah,
watching your content and reading silently without saying something, and then suddenly there they are popping up, buying into one of your programs or something. That's so true. So it is about sort of putting yourself out there and just sticking with it, isn't it? And being genuine and so on. So I always love talking to you. I remember the first time I met you a few years ago in Berlin. I loved it then, and I still love it now. So thanks so much for sharing your latest insights, and best of luck. And maybe I'll connect with you again in a few years' time and hear how you're going then.
I know. I'll have to keep track of all the things that have changed between now and
Yes,
between
keep
now
a
and
notebook
next.
of all your growing wisdom. Thanks so much, Dave.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna.